How's it going?
Good evening, everyone. I have a very special guest for you tonight. She is our newest family member, and she's adorable. I'm not sure if you'll be able to see her very well with this camera, but she's sleeping right here on my arm because she's a very cuddly little creature, and she loves people. She loves to follow them around, and then she likes to put her head on their foot and fall asleep, which is possibly the cutest thing that a little creature can do. So let me show you our dear Dot. So we already have a Dip. You guys know him. You love him. He's a huge white and black cat. This is Dip. Say hello, Dip. Dot. I keep calling her Dip. This is Dot. Dot is different than Dip. Dot is a lot noisier than Dip, and she's affectionate in different ways than Dip is, and Dip is not sure about her. Andy says that her full name is SarahPatchLids.me, but I think her full name might be Dorothy or Dot, like polka dot. She's very sleepy. She sleeps quite a lot right now. She's still just such a small baby. I think she's about 6 weeks old, although her dad or her previous father is more than welcome to jump on and correct me if he thinks that I'm wrong. She's either 6 or 8 weeks old. She's very, very small. She's less than 2 months old, just about. And she has another shot upcoming. She's going to go to the vet with Dip. We're going to take a family outing and go out to the veterinarian. So that will be fun and hopefully not too traumatic. Dip doesn't mind the vet. He gets along with everyone really well there. I wanted to start off this evening with some super awesome news that I saw floating around on the Twitters today. This is a tweet that I came across. And she titled this "Women Getting Common W's." And I don't know if it's that common because we're going to look at it. It says, "A decade ago, my suicide attempt failed." And it's a young lady who's just glowing, and she has a baby in her pack on the front, and then 2 little girls who are just a spitting image of her, same eyes and everything. It's really identical. And she goes on to say, "Look at all the life we would have been robbed of. Her girls are just gorgeous, and she is such a lovely gift." And I just thought this was so sweet and wonderful. And the first comment that you come across is somebody saying, "Why are you guys all so horrible?" Because some of the comments are really kind of distressing. And I'm not sure what inhabits people to behave in this way, but a lot of people are like being mean and rude and talking about abortion and stuff. I'm like, it doesn't make any sense. So I pulled this up because this is a really good point, and I'm going to talk about the horrible comments in a minute. Maggie Luna says, "The happiest people are often people who went through hard times, depression, and suicidal thoughts in the past. Healing from that is a huge win." That is entirely correct. Very much the case of the best people that I've ever met in this life have been through very hard times and recovered from them. And I think on the side of the really mean comments, I'm willing to bet that what we're seeing there is a form of guilt that people don't know how to talk about. Because when you think about it, our culture really has no language for discussing feelings of having done the wrong things. So a lot of times when people look at something really nice like this, they think, wow, I really should have done that. You know, that would have been a way better comeback from my near suicide story or whatever. They often feel like failures because they haven't lived up to this. So when there's a standard that's so clearly very good, it's very easy for people who don't understand their own feelings of guilt and regret to just spew angry words at this person, which is really sad and hard to see. I have no idea who this lady is. I looked her up on Instagram but wasn't able to find her. I think this is on TikTok, but I think this is TikTok because there's no arrow button here, or it's a little bit different than Instagram. But anyway, I just thought that was super nice and wanted to bring that up to kick off tonight's show because it was so sweet and such a good reminder that we never know what the future holds, and we really need to keep that in mind when we're staring down the idea of possibly taking the Canadian way out. That's never the way to go. We have other good news today. We have a couple other good news stories. We have Utah being the first state to pass a gender-affirming care ban in 2023, and that's from NBC, I think. They're trying to put a negative spin on it, but it's a very good thing. We have a pro-life activist arrested by the FBI who was acquitted on federal charges. We have the results are changing quickly from Google, which is actually something that I ran into when I went to look up one of these stories earlier today. It looks like the results below are changing quickly. If this topic is new, it can sometimes take time for reliable sources to publish information, which is exactly what happens anytime a story comes out that big tech doesn't like or want you to know about. Andy says, I hope Dot doesn't pee on you during the show, and I feel a little dampness already, so I'm not sure if she's going to ooze on me throughout the show, but that'll be a nice little surprise for all of us to enjoy together. I really don't mind. I used to work in a hospital. Nothing phases me anymore. We're going to talk about Pfizer admitting engineering COVID in a lab, which is really interesting. We're going to talk about how Trump is ramping up the war on Ron DeSantis, which is going to be interesting too. And then we're going to look at the story that I was looking up this morning when I got the results are changing rapidly note, which was about the United Kingdom's army, Britain's army, spying on critics of their lockdown. Very interesting. And then finally, if we have time, we're going to address Jordan Peterson announcing his own version of the World Economic Forum. And he has a really interesting idea. We're going to watch this video from when he was on with Joe Rogan, and he has some great thoughts. So we'll get right into it. All right, it is now 6 p.m., so let's get rolling. We are going to go over this Utah ban first of all. So let's go here. Kevin says, I do, going to be funny to witness and it will be recorded, therefore internet gold. I might not let you guys know if she does pee on me. I think she's just warm, but she's suspiciously warm, so I have concerns about this as well. I'd pick her up again, but she's sleeping so cutely. It's really adorable. She likes to stick her head in like the corners of your elbow or your knees or whatever. So let's read this first story. Utah is the first state to pass a gender-affirming care ban in 2023. Let's see how NBC tries to pretend this is bad. Governor Spencer Cox, who vetoed a restriction on transgender students athletes last year, signed the trans healthcare bill into law on Saturday. It's kind of interesting that he's kind of switched his perspective, but let's read more about it. Hopefully they'll give us a good perspective on it, although I have my doubts since this is NBC. Utah is the first state to ban gender-affirming medical care for transgender minors this year, hopefully not the last. Governor Spencer Cox, a Republican, signed a bill Saturday that bars minors from receiving gender-affirming surgeries and places an indefinite moratorium on their access to puberty blockers and hormone therapy. Good. The bill, which passed in the Utah State Legislature last week and became effective Saturday, immediately after the governor signed it, is prospective, so minors who were diagnosed with gender dysphoria before the effective date would still be able to receive care if they meet a list of requirements. Legislation that impacts our most vulnerable youth requires careful consideration and deliberation. While not a perfect bill, we are grateful for Senator Kennedy's more nuanced and thoughtful approach to this terribly divisive issue, Cox said in a statement Saturday, referencing the bill's sponsor, Republican State Senator Michael Kennedy. While we understand our words will be of little comfort to those who disagree with us, we sincerely hope that we can treat our transgender families with more love and respect as we work to better understand the science and consequence behind these procedures. Good for him. This is exactly the right approach, I think. Tampa Doll says, I'm watching your show while nursing my week-old baby. Isn't just the hormones. Even the thought of aborting a precious baby brings me to tears. I completely agree. I am very glad that your baby is live and healthy and happy there with you. I'm in a group full of lovely moms, and it's really fun to kind of discuss really life-affirming ideas and supportive positions you can take just to help other women, because all of them in that group say they've been in other groups that seem so down and so depressing because women tend to tear each other down if they're not rooted on the right things. And that is a desire to build up families and build up each other and make the world a better place. So good for you. I'm very glad that your baby is well. Hopefully it will continue to be so. And hopefully your journey with a little week-old baby will continue to go smoothly. In an emotional letter about his veto, Cox cited research about the high risk of suicide among trans youth and additional research that's found that acceptance reduces the risk of suicide. I don't understand what they are going through or why they feel the way they do, but I want them to live, he wrote. And all the research shows that even a little acceptance and connection can reduce suicidality significantly. But Cox told local news station Fox 13 on Thursday after the ban on gender-affirming care passed the House that he did not plan to veto the bill. Yes, because that is in no way inconsistent with what he said earlier. You can be fully accepting of people who don't understand their own gender identity and still outlaw this for people who are young. You can recognize the grave dangers it poses to young people. His office did not immediately return a request for additional comment. State Senator Kennedy, a family practice physician, told colleagues in a hearing this month that gender-affirming treatments lack sufficient long-term research. That is entirely correct. He is 100% right about that. And one of the things they found in the UK was that a lot of those kids who were saying that they were gender confused were actually really literally just going through a phase that they would later go on to grow out of, which was very telling indeed, and other countries would do well to remember that. State Senator Daniel Thatcher, one of Kennedy's Republican colleagues, disagreed and was the only Republican to speak out against the bill. I gotta switch to live chat. The only Republican to speak out against a previous, though similar version of the bill. He argued that though his colleagues might not understand gender-affirming care, every credible medical organization on the planet says that this is the safest, best, and most appropriate care to save lives. No, completely disagree. Michael Kennedy, it says here, is a family physician, and I am fully willing to trust his expertise because he works in the field. Accredited medical organizations, including the American Medical Association, the American Academy of Pediatrics, and the American Psychological Association, have supported such care for minors. That doesn't make it good. That doesn't make it ethical just because these associations are in support of it. Thatcher added that the bill could face legal challenges because it only prohibits the care for people who are transgender, but does not prohibit the care for children who might need it for other reasons. The bill provides exemptions for intersex minors, for minors who experience early puberties, and for those who have medically necessary reasons that don't include treatment for gender dysphoria. A judge blocked a similar law in Arkansas last year, pending the outcome of a lawsuit during which lawyers for the American Civil Liberties Union argued that such bans on care are discriminatory, using reasoning similar to Thatcher's. Thatcher, who is recovering from multiple strokes, was absent from the Senate vote Friday. Oof. A crowd of protesters gathered outside the Utah Capitol on Tuesday ahead of a committee hearing on the bill, during which a number of transgender teens spoke out against it. That's not very interesting to me. I'm not interested in anecdotes. I'm more interested in the fact, which is correct, that came from Michael Kennedy, saying that there is no long-term research in this, and the longest-term research that we have shows us that this is not actually a net positive for these young people. The most interesting information to me is that people who receive this kind of care are still not much less likely to take the Canadian way out when it comes down to it. They are still at a very high rate of that kind of distress, emotional distress, and it makes me very sad to discuss, but at the same time, they obviously have much deeper emotional issues that need to be handled, stuff that doesn't have anything to do with the externalities of their body and has everything to do with the way that they think and the way that they view the world. And physically changing the outward structure of their human form is not enough to fix the problems that they have in their hearts and minds. So I think that Utah is definitely taking the right step here. Dave says, Utah just moved up on my place on the list of possible states to move to. Andy says they really effectively assert that someone with gender dysphoria not getting surgical intervention before the age of 18 is a death sentence. Yes, and I don't think that's something that they can do in good faith. This has certainly not been the case in the past, but all of this rhetoric has accelerated exceedingly quickly. Reverend O.O. says, was this governor? No, Spencer Cox is the governor, and they quoted him earlier on, and then Senators Michael Kennedy, they were talking about later, and then Daniel Thatcher, I think, who dissented to the bill, was talking later. Skriddle says we need our country back for the people, not the government. I'm fully inclined to agree. Somebody says found a rhino. I'm not sure who you're referring to. Possibly Thatcher. Yeah, I think that when people really are trying to be super compassionate, it really clouds their sense of judgment. So what we're seeing at the southern border is a really good example of this, because I think that they really think that it's the most compassionate thing to do to just let people flood over the border, and they're not taking into account the risks of human trafficking. They're not taking into account the role that the cartel plays, and they're really not considering all the ways that this can harm people much more than it can help them. This is actually something that they're seeing in New York City right now. Oh, she's waking up a little bit. Because the migrants that are being shipped there are refusing to go to where they're supposed to go, and they're demanding fancy hotels, they're demanding really nice lodging, and they're overall acting very entitled, even though they just came, across the border into supposedly shelter from all sorts of horrible things. At least that's the story that we're told by leftists. Certainly not the case. But that's one win for the conservative movement thus far. The other win that came up today is the pro-life activist who was arrested by the FBI has been acquitted on federal charges. And I don't know if you guys remember the story of Mark Houck. He protested at Planned Parenthood, I believe, and in retaliation, the Biden Department of Justice sent 30 agents, 30 FBI agents to his house, I believe in the middle of the night. His family was certainly present and they were horrified by this, of course. This was incredibly traumatic. A federal jury on Monday acquitted Catholic pro-life activist Mark Houck, who was charged with violating the FACE Act over a 2021 skirmish with a Planned Parenthood volunteer outside a Pennsylvania clinic. The FACE Act prohibits violent, threatening, damaging, and obstructive conduct intended to injure, intimidate, or interfere with the right to seek, obtain, or provide reproductive health services. From my understanding, this also applies to churches. And when they were doing all these anti-life activism sessions outside of churches, I strongly felt that this FACE Act should have been applied to those situations as well. Houck was accused of physically assaulting Bruce Love, a 72-year-old clinic escort, in October 2021. Love was attempting to escort two patients exiting the Philadelphia clinic when Houck forcefully shoved him to the ground, according to the Justice Department. On a separate occasion, Houck allegedly verbally confronted an escort and shoved him to the ground outside the clinic. Odd trend of shoving people to the ground. Certainly not the best way to get that done. Love sustained injuries that required medical attention. However, Houck said he spoke outside of abortion clinics each week and sometimes brought his 12-year-old son along. He said he shoved Love after the clinic escort invaded his son's personal space and yelled at him. Oh, there's the other side of the story. At the time, an attorney for Houck accused the DOJ of targeting the pro-life activists solely to intimidate people of faith and pro-life Americans. Rather than accepting Mark Houck's offer to appear voluntarily, the Biden Department of Justice chose to make an unnecessary show of potentially deadly force, sending 20 heavily armed federal agents to the Houck residence at dawn this past Friday, said the attorney representing Houck, Thomas More Society Vice President and Senior Counsel Peter Breen. In threatening form, after nearly breaking down the family's front door, at least 5 agents pointed guns at Mark's head and arrested him in front of his wife and 7 young children who were terrified that their husband and father would be shot dead before their eyes. The FBI has disputed this version of events, saying in a statement in September that inaccurate claims were being made about the arrest. Well, considering that it's his attorney, Mark's attorney, I doubt that there's much inaccuracy here. FBI agents knocked on Mr. Houck's front door, identified themselves as FBI agents, and asked him to exit the residence. Why did they send the FBI to his house at all? I genuinely don't understand the thinking here, unless it was just to make a show of punishing someone for having the wrong views. That's really what it looks like to me, and that is disgusting to me. Oh, we're defending the FBI again. Okay, great. He did so and was taken into custody without incident pursuant to an indictment. While it's the FBI's standard to practice to not discuss such operational specifics, we can say the number of personnel and vehicles widely reported as being on scene Friday is an overstatement, and the tactic used by FBI personnel were professional, in line with standard practice, and intended to ensure the safety of everyone present in and outside the residence, the statement added. I really, really don't believe a single word the FBI says, and I probably never will again. Honestly, I don't remember the last time I trusted anything the FBI said. It was probably well before 2016, that's for sure, because it seems like they are the most incredibly biased organization that we have the displeasure of working with. In fact, let me see. Peter Strzok, I think, worked with them. Yep, Peter Paul Strzok II, former United States Federal Bureau of Investigation. So this sneering jerk, notorious ex-G-man, explains himself and takes aim at Trump. Yeah, so this guy, he and his lover lady were putting together what he called insurance policies in case Donald Trump was elected. And this man, there is a German word for a person with a face like Peter Strzok's. I hope you guys are familiar with it because it's particularly intriguing, and he has a really almost demonic smirk. I don't know if you guys have seen it. Holy cow, this guy is incredibly don't like him. He pretty much tainted my entire view of the FBI, and I really think that he is just a nasty, horrible person. He is just so self-assured. Oh my gosh. I can't. All of these gifs of him just like, this reminds me of that lady who was in the gym who made that little, oh my gosh, I can't even explain it. It's so disgusting. Thanks. I hate it. Anyway, he is a representative of the FBI in my mind, and he was as crooked as the day is long. And I don't know if you recall, but I think it was Chuck Schumer who went on to one of these TV shows and was talking about how, you know, organizations like the FBI have 6 ways of Sunday from getting back at you if you decide to go toe-to-toe with them. So it wouldn't surprise me at all if they did decide to go after him. Absolutely crazy. Anyway, so those are the 2 good news pieces. I think they're fantastic. Now, here's one that's not really so great, and I'm going to show you the example that I saw today of this. Results are changing quickly. Media and big tech take pains to bury the Pfizer mutate video. FDA declines to say whether it asked Pfizer for explanation of undercover video. Tucker Carlson, producer, claims Google staffer called us to kill the story. That would not surprise me at all. Tabloid quickly erases report with no explanation. Yeah, so I guess the Daily Mail, whom I love and appreciate every day for their good work, I guess had the story and then didn't have the story. It was really strange. So let's read this summary that Just the News has for us. I don't want to watch this. Thank you, Just the News. Undercover video that purportedly shows a Pfizer executive explaining the company's direct evolution plan to keep COVID in a cash cow, then furiously backpedaling when Project Veritas founder James O'Keefe exposes the ruse, has drawn intense curiosity from members of Congress, but intermittent big tech throttling and a partial media blackout. See, that tells me that what he said was fully correct, even though his first defense when he was confronted about it was to say that he was lying, which I would believe. Like, if you have a young man who's viciously ambitious, it wouldn't surprise me if he were lying about everything. But I do think there was a grain of truth to what he was saying. And the fact that Pfizer came out with such a ridiculous statement at 8 p.m. on a Friday night, nonetheless, they know what they're doing. They know that no one's going to pay any attention to a press release from 8 p.m. on a Friday night. Despite the fact that the figure identified as Jordan Walker belatedly called himself a liar trying to impress a person on a date, played the race card in requesting police involvement, and physically attacked O'Keefe and the film crew, a prominent tabloid inexplicably removed its article in The Sting. Senator Ron Johnson demanded a congressional investigation of vaccine manufacturers and the entire COVID vaccine approval process, while Senator Marco Rubio, asked Pfizer CEO Albert Bourla to explain the company's actual or possible plans to mutate SARS-CoV-2 and any related discussions with industry peers or government officials. The FDA declined either to answer whether it was following up with Pfizer for an explanation of the figure's comments or give the agency's interpretation of the video, telling Just the News to contact Pfizer, which has not responded to queries going back to Thursday afternoon. The figure identified as Walker claimed regulators would not closely scrutinize Pfizer's exploratory efforts because of the revolving door between government officials and pharmaceutical companies. And of course, we know this is true. We read an article just the other day about how many spooks were getting into big tech. So it absolutely does not surprise me that they have the same issue in big pharma. The Sting victim also previewed a potential explanation from Pfizer to Congress by denying to his fraudulent date that directed evolution is gain-of-function research, the subject of ongoing inquiries from lawmakers. He speculated the initial Wuhan COVID outbreak was a result of insufficiently controlled mutations. Search engines are giving an unexpected result for the controversy. Neither Google nor privacy-focused Brave, which last year poached users upset with DuckDuckGo's pledge to bury Russian disinformation, returned first-page results from Project Veritas itself in Just the News searches for Project Veritas Pfizer. Both surfaces purported fact checks of the video and the trickle of mainstream media coverage in The Hill and local media, and both included an October 2021 fact check of an earlier Project Veritas video about Pfizer. So what they chose to do instead of actually showing the Pfizer video was to show a fact check of an earlier video from Veritas about Pfizer. Fascinating. It's so sneaky the way they do it. Newsweek's fact check begins by aiming to discredit Project Veritas based on previous mainstream media fact checks, and then analyzes it line by line, at one point downplaying the potential problems gain-of-function research can cause. Several Twitter users shared Google screenshots reading "results are changing quickly" and explaining that reliable information was still indexing. The recurring misspelling of Walker's first name in searches didn't prompt Google to suggest his correct name as it typically does with typos. Fascinating. Google hid primary sources, including Walker's LinkedIn page, which Brave did return in its pre-scrubbed form as of Wednesday night, confirming Walker's role at Pfizer. So let's look at this tweet. It's wild how Google can wipe clean any evidence that Jordan Tristan Walker is a high-level Pfizer executive. So here we are, Jordan Tristan Walker, Pfizer. This is the same result that I got when I was trying to find this guy. Army spied on lockdown dissidents. And this is something I was looking for a further story about the British Army spying on people who did not like the idea of the lockdowns. This is the exact same message they give you. Really interesting that this is what Google uses. So this is just something I want you guys to be aware of going forward. If you come across this message, I use Google because I know how to weigh my sources thoroughly and well, and I know what sources to look for and not look for when I'm going through to see, is there actual coverage of this? I don't just want Breitbart. I don't just want, the Daily Caller. I want CNN. I want, the Daily Wire. I want MSNBC. I want all of the sources, and Google offers most of them, except when they try to play games like this. It's just something to be aware of. We know that they do this. We know that they're evil. We know that they're lying pretty much all the time, but they do assemble the best group of different news sources that you can typically find, and it lets you see where the left is coming from. When they surface all of these fact checks, you can know that something deeper is going on here, because typically when I go into it, I know exactly what I'm looking for, and I know that when I come up with a fact check, that's not what I'm looking for. I'm looking for the original source of the fact check, not the fact check itself. I would say using Google is probably like an intermediate to advanced news readers tool. It's definitely not the best, but I'm not going to slink away from it because it offers me left-wing sources. I want to know what the left is saying because I know that my arguments can stand toe-to-toe with theirs and prove that they're wrong. I can show them the evidence. Let's continue in this article. Fox News host Tucker Carlson highlighted Google's then blackout of the controversy on his Thursday program, saying it illustrates the power of the pharmaceutical industry. Carlson's producer Greg Ray claimed that a Google staffer who used to work for Fox called us to kill the story. Wow. Senator Ken Buck told Carlson that this was par for the course with Google, which he alleged changed their algorithm to benefit Joe Biden during the general election campaign, rigged results to promote Google's favored reviews, and showered campaign cash on both parties to evade accountability. That is the sneakiest way you can go. Oh my gosh, this dog is sleeping here and she's so cute. I have to take a picture of her for you guys. I will be putting that on the Instagram at the Lighter Dips, where she is now the star of the show. Dip's kind of standoffish, but once he gets into it and they start to be friends, I'm sure we'll have some adorable pictures for you guys. Brave Software head of communications Catherine Corey told Just the News the old fact check about Project Veritas showed up high in results because the source, the Poynter Institute, made an invisible meta tag update a few days ago, meaning the page was labeled as fresh in Brave's search engine. It's fixing the bug, she says. That's shady too. I do not like that. Brave Search is an independent search engine. We do not censor results, nor does it apply blocks or rules to disfavor content other than child CSAM, bad stuff about kids. Corey said, "We do not prioritize so-called fact-checkers in any way." She didn't answer why Project Veritas itself didn't appear in first-page results, but said its rankings depend on relevancy to the query, freshness, page popularity, etc. Google did not answer Ray's claim about trying to kill Carlson's story, but told Just the News the changing quickly notices have been triggered millions of times since the feature's rollout a year and a half ago. I'm sure it has. And you know what? I've only seen it about articles affecting the right, articles coming from the right, just like this stuff from Project Veritas, as well as what I was pointing out earlier, which is about the army spying on lockdown critics and skeptics. And this article that I was looking up was literally over 1 day old. It was 2 days old. This is not results changing quickly. This is stuff that's from 2 days ago. So there's really no excuse for this kind of stuff. Political ideology is not a signal our systems understand, and Google does not manually manipulate web listings for ranking purposes, the spokesperson says. It sounds like they're working very hard to get around the truth there. Let's see if we can.
So we opened the show with this pretty amazing, really amazing series of videos from Project Veritas showing a Pfizer executive admitting the company is engaged in something called directed evolution of the virus. That means mutating the coronaviruses on purpose to make them more dangerous. The executive now says he was lying to impress a date. So you see these videos, and 12 million people have seen them on Twitter. You want to know more about this guy and about Pfizer. Why wouldn't you want to know? It's your country. But big tech quickly took action, apparently, to protect Pfizer and to censor the story. Google, it looks like, censored searches for the story almost immediately. Now, why did they do that? And how can we stop them from doing that since they have a monopoly? Ken Buck is a member of Congress representing the state of Colorado, also authored the book Crushed, Big Tech's War on Free Speech, and truly a champion on this issue in the Congress, joins us tonight. Congressman, thanks so much for coming on. So Google has a monopoly on speech, over 90% on search, over 90% in the United States. How are they allowed to do this?
Well, Tucker, they do it. We know that in June of 2020, they changed their algorithm to benefit Joe Biden and disadvantage Donald Trump. We know that so many conservative newspapers and media sites are buried on page 10 of any Google search, and the views that they want to espouse, that they want to promote, are found at the top of the page. And so it doesn't surprise me at all that they are protecting one of their other corporate giants.
That doesn't surprise me at all either, honestly, because we all know that people are very lazy, and even the slightest barrier to any kind of pursuit of information is enough to just take most people out of the search pool. Like if you can literally put something halfway down the first page in Google and 90% of people are not going to see it. And if you put it on the second page of Google, something like 99.9% of people won't see it because nobody goes to the second page, and Google knows this. Let's see here. Some say this is incredible. Some say Jordan Walker doesn't work for Pfizer. Well, it seems he at least did. A LinkedIn page shows up on search engines but has been removed from the site. The Daily Mail article on this was also removed within the last hour. Huge cover-up. Interesting. Human Events noted that the disappearance of the Daily Mail and MSN reports in the story written by Project Veritas press secretary R.C. Maxwell, which said neither website responded to questions. That surprises me about the Daily Mail. I really wonder if they're getting some form of bribery from probably Big Pharma. Honestly, I think that this is a huge issue that no one ever thinks about. We kind of always think in terms of violence and pressure in an illegal way, but very few people think about the power of bribery and whether these companies will be susceptible to, shaking a little bag of change in front of their face and saying, hey, you know what you should do? Not this. And that's something that we really need to think about moving forward, because I think we're going to see this more and more. Carlson and social media users speculated the disappearance and broader media blackout, which included CNN and MSNBC, were related to Pfizer's heavy advertising spending in mainstream media. There you go. The company paused its advertising on Twitter following billionaire Elon Musk's takeover, according to the Wall Street Journal, due to concerns about a pullback on content moderation. Thank goodness. So glad. I don't know if you guys know this, but Pfizer has blocked me. Their Twitter account has me blocked because I asked a question about why they were writing a piece that glorified their work on, I think, something like the Huffington Post. Literally just asked a question why they were talking with journalists and writing an article that sang their own praises, because that was extremely shady to me. And wouldn't you know, it got even shadier, and they immediately blocked me. And now I've been blocked by them for probably about a year now, which I view as a huge win. But really, really shady just for asking a question about like their motivations. There was somebody on their social media page that was so touchy about that kind of thing that they were willing to block me, which is fascinating. So anyway, I just wanted to highlight that to you guys and show you what to look for. It's this notification. It looks like the results below are changing quickly. So this doesn't actually block the results. It just means you have to scroll down a little bit. In fact, let's see if it's still there. Army spied on lockdown critics. I don't see it anymore. Look at that. Interesting. Okay, so from this morning, that was on my phone, so I don't know if that's maybe something that's more often applied to mobile stuff, but that's just something to be aware of. All right, let's see what you guys are thinking. Dip and Dot. Yes, Dip's right here, or Dip's right there, and Dot is right here. She's a little ball of fluff. Let me see if I can gently pick her up to show her to you. There she is. I bet you can't tell which end is her head. She's so black. Like I said, she's very, very hard to photograph. I suspect that her eyes are going to be blue like her dad, who's an Australian Shepherd. Her mom is so cute and playful, little Shih Tzu. She's got that long torso, and Dot has it too. Although it's really hard to see when she's all curled up like this. I'm trying to keep her warm. She seems to really like the warmth. She's still just a little puppy. I'm trying to make her feel welcome. Yeah, she kept making an appearance. Yeah, so Andy says, I know how that sounds. That is Instagram, but I've come to the conclusion that we have to use big tech companies to gain access to mainstream audiences. That's correct. That's what we did at Timcast as well. Gain of function is so old-fashioned. The new word is evolution. Yes, I know they're changing it. Should large companies have the ability to block, like Fortune 500s? I don't know, but after all the pressure on me to take the Pfizer vaccine, it was really kind of surprising that they were uninterested in interacting with me because they could have possibly had the power to persuade me to get their shot. I think they figured I was probably a lost cause. There was so much silly gossip floating around about Timcast and the vaccines. No one at Timcast was ever forced to get the vaccine. In fact, I think most of us did not get it for whatever reason. I didn't get it because there actually was a time when many of us had it. And I had it probably in the most light form you could imagine. Some of my coworkers were just knocked out, like in bed for days, whereas I just had I had a runny nose, I had an upset stomach, and then I lost my sense of smell and taste. And that was it. And that was admittedly like the longest term effect that any of us felt, I think. But certainly none of us were required to take any vaccine there. St. Miles, I said, I did my research and never got it. Yeah, I had natural immunity. The only people at Timcast who got the shot had already gotten it for some previous job, says Andy. That's correct. Yep. There was some silly rumors floating around like Tim forced everyone to get it, but we were for some reason covering it up, which is much more dramatic. Guys, rumors like this are always so much more dramatic than real life. Like literally anytime you hear something like that, you have to assume like a 75% increase in drama just to make it more interesting, because that's like always the case. Like you'll hear these crazy rumors and just like, is that really true? And I'm really hoping to encourage you guys to exercise your critical thinking and be like, I don't think that's true. I'm going to wait until I hear more information or see if I can learn more on my own. Or, if it doesn't affect me, I'm just not going to worry about it because it's just a rumor. But silly stuff. Oh man, Pfizer will rebrand in a 2 to 3 year period. Maybe so. Andy says, don't allow your information diet to be controlled by these woke authoritarian tech giants. That's right. Follow as many sources as humanly possible. That's actually one of the reasons that I really like Twitter. I think it's fantastic. You get a wide range of news. A lot of it's very silly. A lot of it's deadly serious, and mainstream media isn't covering it. So it's a great combination of different things. I hate rumors. 85% increase to anxiety and drama. Yeah, very silly. I stay far away from rumors. I was an early adopter, got it in December 2020, COVID or the shot. Either way, hopefully you have strong immunity now. Let's look at this one because it's kind of linked to what we just talked about. Pfizer admits engineering COVID in lab studies to ensure its antiviral drug works in new variants, but pharma giant insists tests were not gain of function and did not pose risk to the public. I'll bet you a nickel that the people who worked in that lab in Wuhan also thought that this did not pose a risk to the public. Pharma giant finally responded to viral undercover video by Project Veritas, denied doing gain of function or directed evolution experiments in statement, did admit to testing new mutations of its antiviral Paxlovid in low-risk studies. Pfizer has admitted it engineered mutated COVID viruses in lab tests to ensure its vaccine and drugs remained effective against new variants, but the company denies the experiment posed the risk to the public. So this is actually my initial thought when I saw the Veritas video, because I thought, does this happen often? Do do pharmaceutical companies often create new versions of the strain that they're trying to build drugs against? Because that actually makes sense to me that they would do that. Now, how safe it is and whether they were actually going to weaponize it as a kind of biological weapon to keep people requiring their pharmaceutical skills, I don't know. Well, let's read about when this press release came out, because this is really what's telling. In a press release sneaked out on Friday night, thank you for noticing that, Daily Mail. That's exactly what happened. 8 p.m. on a Friday night is not business hours. The pharma giant finally responded to an undercover video that went viral last week, in which a supposed director at the firm claimed the company was exploring directed evolution research on monkeys to make the virus, quote, more potent. Jordan Tristan Walker, who appears to be a senior staffer in Pfizer's Research and Development Division, was caught making the explosive claim in a sting by the right-wing activist group Project Veritas. Pfizer flatly denied conducting gain-of-function or directed evolution research on monkeys, but admitted that in a limited number of cases, it altered the virus and tested new mutations against its COVID antiviral drug Paxlovid in a petri dish. Interesting. The New York-based firm claims the experiments are essential to get a hold of drug-resistant strains and says similar tests are carried out, by many companies and academic institutions in the U.S. and around the world. This is why it's good to know somebody, to have friends who work in these fields, who can tell you what's considered normal, because the normal world is running on a very different parameter than the world of research and development and all of this medical stuff. They do things a little bit differently. They speak English a little bit differently. The whole language is a little bit different. And us normies don't fully understand all of this medical and healthcare stuff. So if you know somebody in the field, you should definitely talk to them about this stuff. And if you know somebody who works in pharmacy, you can ask them about this kind of thing. They may not know about it if they work at a different level of involvement. But it's definitely worth asking, because you might be surprised by what you learn. TheDailyMail.com spoke to several independent virologists and epidemiologists who were split about whether Pfizer's experiments posed a risk to the public. This can often be the case too. Some think it's amazing and wonderful, some think it's horrible and life-threatening. Professor Richard Ebright, a molecular biologist at Rutgers University in New Jersey, has been an outspoken advocate of the lab leak theory, the idea COVID escaped from the Wuhan Institute of Virology in China. He told DailyMail.com that Pfizer's press release unequivocally indicates that Pfizer and its collaborators performed high-risk gain-of-function research and enhanced potential pandemic pathogen research. But Professor Ian Jones, a virologist at the University of Reading in the UK, told the website, "I don't find Pfizer's statement alarming for a number of reasons. Paxlovid works by blocking the virus from releasing an enzyme crucial for COVID to replicate when it enters the body, known as the 3CL protease," explained Professor Jones. Okay, so this is where things get really dicey for us normal people. Most of us don't really have a grasp of what exactly the 3CL protease is. The only reason that I'm even able to probably properly pronounce that is because I have that little bit of the background in nursing prerequisites that I had before I started working for Timcast. So most normal people cannot fully engage with this kind of stuff, but let's read on. So we have the Pfizer Pearl River site in Rockland County. Work on the live virus that causes COVID must be carried out in a BSL-3 or BSL-4 lab. So these are levels of security of the lab, and this is here in between New York and New Jersey. The research lab, located around 20 minutes from New York, is the company's only biosafety level 3 lab out of its 9 major research and development sites in the US and UK. Jones said Pfizer's experiments involve looking at what changes to the sequence of the protease gene would be necessary to make the virus no longer sensitive to the drug. So they may make a range of mutations in the virus led by computational predictions, and then culture that mutated virus in the drug to see if indeed it is no longer sensitive, and if so, by what degree. Many of the mutants they would make will not do anything, but some could make Paxlovid-resistant virus. The risk would be that this could escape and spread, making the drug useless. My point is that such a virus remains unaltered in every other way, so the overall risk of the virus being able to infect people and leaking from the lab is very small. Professor Jones said this tiny risk is outweighed by the benefit of being ahead of the virus evolution in nature. So they're doing very much a cost-benefit analysis, and this would not surprise me because I have to be straight with you guys. I can't be on the side of the people who hate everything Big Pharma does because I have to take medicine that comes from these companies. So I cannot say they shouldn't exist because they do research on medicine for diseases that not very many people have. Like at this point, there are still a lot of people in the world who have MS, like more people than we've ever realized before. But I was thinking back over it and I was like, you know what probably happened to people who had multiple sclerosis in the past was that they just grew weaker and weaker until they died at a younger age. Probably was exactly what happened to these people before they had any understanding of how the myelin sheaths in the brain worked or anything like that. But anytime Big Pharma comes up with breakthrough research over this kind of stuff, over a very rare disease, and then goes on to at least attempt to make it mostly affordable to the people who need it, I have to say this is probably a net benefit for humanity. And so for that reason, I can't be staunchly anti-Big Pharma. I just can't be because I rely on those products and there's nothing else I can do about it. Like there's only so much you can do for MS when it comes to living a healthy lifestyle and eating all the right things. It is a progressive disease. It's an autoimmune disease. It's your own body attacking your own nerve cells. And it's not something that you really have any say in. And I know that people will tell you that if you just eat like an all-meat diet or something like that, you can fix all your problems. But this stuff hasn't been proven to be the case. But in either case, there's a lot of nuance here that I think that really needs to be thoroughly debunked. I think that if you walk it back up to the level of like the big tech giants trying to censor all criticism of Pfizer, you can say with pretty much open and shut clarity that Pfizer was lying about what they were doing. And the fact that this kind of stuff was taken off the sites like Daily Mail and MSN is mind-blowing to me. That's such a sign that they know something is wrong. And to me, that's such an indicator of guilt for these big companies that I think that alone should be a huge red flag warning sign. Let's see here. To me, it doesn't look like Pfizer's doing anything that isn't being done by many other groups. Okay, but does that make it okay? Also, from the press release, Pfizer is only modeling mutations that are already spreading in the population, so not creating new viruses. Pfizer's response was released at 8 p.m. on Friday and was buried in busy news cycle. Yep. It came 3 days after the Project Veritas video was released and unleashed a frenzy on social media. Mr. Walker was labeled in the video as Pfizer's Director of Research and Development, Strategic Operations, and mRNA Scientific Planning. DailyMail.com could not verify that Mr. Walker was in fact an employee in that position at the company, and Pfizer has not responded to several requests for comment in the past week. That was a problem that they were saying kept coming up. They were like, do we know that this guy works for Pfizer? Well, according to the LinkedIn page, it looks like he did, and it looks like that was his field. It looks like that much, at least, about his story was true and correct, at least at the time that he said it. No verifiable profile of Jordan Walker on LinkedIn appears to exist on LinkedIn, only profiles imitating him. But DailyMail.com discovered that a man named Jordan Walker holds an active Pfizer email address. Interesting. And a job titled Director, Research and Development of mRNA Scientific Strategy does exist at the company, which is similar to the title Mr. Walker was said to hold. A job description posted last October suggests the role mainly involves business development rather than scientific experiments. The ad said the successful candidate would be involved in developing the strategic vision for mRNA technology at Pfizer and identifying and prioritizing opportunities to deliver innovative medicines across Pfizer's portfolio and advancing those priorities in collaboration with Pfizer's chief scientific officers. Very interesting. So let's see this headline. Dangerous gain-of-function research continues to go on in the U.S. because of poor oversight, shocking no one. That is the damning conclusion of a congressional watchdog report prompted by an explosive DailyMail.com revelation into rules around gain-of-function studies. Oh, that's kind of interesting. Well, this is too much to get into at the moment. This is from the 20th, so you guys should definitely go and check this one out, which is also from the Daily Mail. They are great because they get these kinds of scoops. Like this one looks like it was an exclusive, which is really a great thing. I'm so glad that they're doing this stuff. I'm just so curious why they got rid of that Pfizer story when it first came out. Let's see what you guys are thinking. I know plenty of you guys will be unhappy with my half-hearted attempt to explain Big Pharma. I know it is complicated. Gain of function is so old-fashioned. New word is evolution. That's right. Let's see. You were an early COVID adopter. How has no one been arrested for the Wuhan lab leaks? That's a great question. It turns out that if you have enough layers of bureaucracy, you can really just kind of get away with anything, which is really not good news for the normal people, but it's great news for criminals. This doggie is twitching. She is talking in her sleep. She woke up at about 4:15 this morning with what sounded to me like a bad puppy dream. Wake Up Waverly says, I was blocked for a week on 2 platforms for sharing that Veritas video for misinformation. Wow. Very, very interesting. Instagram is just this close to suspending me altogether, so I'm really kind of wary about what I post. Are you okay? Oh, she's a little twitchy baby. Oh, she put my arm to sleep again. The way she's sleeping on it is really putting my hand to sleep. I've had a 90-day restricted ban on Facebook for the last 3 years. And when I check to see what post it was, it's gone. Yeah, that's what they did to me too. They actually came after me during the Kyle Rittenhouse thing, talking about memes that were discussing like bullying and stuff. I guess because I was not on board with the people that he ended up shooting and potentially killing, right? Because of the Confucius Institute group I would never trust, possibly so. A leftist on Twitter said red states have the highest crime in the country. Didn't mention it was all in the Democratic-run cities. These people are very low IQ. Yeah, I've seen that argument floating around, and I was like, that's crazy. Is that really the case? And I was like, yes, of course. It's because of Democrat-controlled cities, because you can have a Republican-run state, but then if you have just a few Republican-run cities, like you have, for example, Memphis, I believe is Democrat-run. Actually, I should fact-check myself. I'm curious. Mayor of Memphis. The mayor of Memphis is Jim Strickland. He is, let's see, I'm kind of curious about this now. Is this a Democrat-run city? Assumed office in 2016. Member of the Memphis City Council. Sometimes they don't give their political affiliations, which is kind of interesting. So let's Google it this way instead. Now I'm holding a dog, so I only have one hand to type with. Memphis. Google's not going to fill this in for me. City. They have a very high murder rate. I know that, which is why they had, the 9th is a heavily Democratic majority black district and considered one of the most Democratic districts in the South. Yeah, okay. Interesting. It has a Cook partisan voting index of D plus 25. Interesting. So, yeah, their mayor is nonpartisan, supposedly. I do believe that the city is majority Democrat. 64.4% of the people voted Democrat. Interesting. 34% voted Republican. So, yep, they are a blue city as well. You're entirely correct in your analysis. That's entirely accurate. What's funny is the people shouting racism, equality, gender will be the ones fighting Russia, China, and Iran. LOL. Not sure about that. National Institute of Health was lying to the gills. Not sure about that. Time to feed the tribe. Making fried rice tonight with deep fried dumplings. That sounds great. It's not necessarily healthy. I just hope you're not using seed oils for sure. Enjoy feeding the family. Always looking forward to those good family meals for sure. That's the best way to bond with your people. All right, we have a couple more things to talk about and then we'll wrap it. We are going to talk about this one next. Not that. That was supposed to be the last one. Now you guys got the sneak peek. Trump ramps up his war on Ron DeSantis. Ex-president now accuses Florida governor of unapologetically, shutting down state and its beaches during COVID and calls him a globalist. What? As 2024 rivalry heats up. Excuse me, now I have the hiccups. Donald Trump fired off a pair of Truth Social posts taking aim at Ron DeSantis. The former president was criticized by fellow Republicans when he called the Florida governor Ron DeSantis just 3 days before his reelection. Trump told reporters on Saturday that it would be disloyal if DeSantis runs in 2024. Well, first of all, I believe DeSantis has said that he wasn't interested in running in 2024 if Trump runs. So from my understanding, he might well be out of the picture, which would be a net loss for the country. Donald Trump lambasted Florida's governor as Ron DeSantis on a Sunday night, punctuating the end of a weekend that saw the former president go in hard against his potential 2024 Republican rival. In a pair of posts in his Truth Social app, Trump wheeled out the nickname twice as he accused DeSantis of being a globalist and having shut down Florida and its beaches during the COVID-19 pandemic. His return to using the moniker is a sign that the ex-president is ready for all-out political war against his burgeoning rival. I just wanted to show you this before we go on, guys, because this was a very interesting headline that I saw come up during the day today. Trump says he told Kemp, "I totally disagree with move to reopen Georgia." The governor's decision drew backlash from critics who pointed to indicators that the state's number of new cases was still on the upward trajectory. U.S. President Donald Trump speaks while flanked by Dr. Robert Redfield, director of the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, during the daily briefing of the Coronavirus Task Force. I'm not sure what year this is from. That's kind of an interesting article. I just wanted to throw that out there because Trump was giving Kemp a very hard time for reopening Georgia. He initially backed off and even encouraged people to vote for DeSantis the next day before steadily re-upping his attacks. In the first of two posts on Sunday night, Trump issued rare praise for the media over press coverage of his first two campaign events, which took place in New Hampshire and then South Carolina on Saturday. Yes, South Carolina, where he's running with his good buddy, Lindsey Graham. So take that into account as well, because one of the main arguments that I had against Trump was that he was horrible at hiring people. And if he's interested in hiring Lindsey Graham, I have to say that I don't think that his judgment in employees has improved. Speaking to reporters on his campaign plane that day, Trump issued a public warning to DeSantis that it would be disloyal for him to run in 2024. And I have to say, I don't like this talk of loyalty because from my understanding, there's not a need for someone to be loyal to a politician. I'm not loyal to any politician. Politicians work for me. I vote for them and they do what I ask them to do. They are public servants, including the president. I don't like talk of loyalty. Loyalty to me evokes memories of a kind of mob boss, and I really don't like that. We are not a crime syndicate. We are a free democratic republic, or whatever it is that we are. He wrote on Truth Social hours later, the revelations about Ron DeSanctimonious doing far worse, all caps, than in many other Republican governors, including that he unapologetically shut down Florida and its beaches, was interesting indeed. Trump added, referring to himself in the third person, DJT, leading big, all caps, 3 exclamation points. In the second post, made just after midnight on Monday, Trump went on a bizarre tangent against conservative group Club for Growth, and somehow DeSantis was caught up in the mix. The influential organization has been at odds with Trump since the 2022 midterm season, when it clashed with him on 2 high-profile Republican Senate primaries in Ohio and Pennsylvania. It undercut his November 15th presidential announcement by releasing an early 2024 poll the day before that showed Trump losing to DeSantis. The Club for No Growth is a globalist group that I have been taking to the cleaners for years. We worked together for a period, but they couldn't get away from China, Europe, Asia, and parts unknown with terrible grammar. Trump wrote on Truth Social in the early hours of Monday morning. This is parts with an apostrophe, as in parts possessive belonging to different parts. Interesting. I like my leaders to have good grammar. They know I won't play that game. I am America first all the way. That's the only way we will make America great again, all caps once again. Ron DeSanctimonious, whom I made governor in both the primary and the general, is also a globalist, and so are his donors. This sentence is so interesting to me because he literally says, Ron DeSanctimonious, which is a petty and childish nickname, whom I made governor in both the primary and general, is a globalist. So you, Donald J. Trump, put a globalist into office in Florida. Is this a good thing or a bad thing? Because I literally can't tell. I really don't like the way Trump writes. It's incredibly confusing. And so are his donors. Oh, so DeSantis donors are also globalists, but Trump put him in office once again. Very interesting, very confusing. I don't understand what he's trying to say here. He also tried to link DeSantis to Jeb Bush, the former Republican governor of Florida, whom Trump soundly defeated for the GOP nomination in 2024, despite the former's place in one of America's foremost political dynasties. Yeah, I'm really glad he defeated Jeb Bush. That man was no good. Trump officially kicked off his third presidential campaign with stops in the early primary states of New Hampshire and South Carolina on Saturday. When I hear that DeSantis might run, I think it's very disloyal, he told CNN and Politico on his plane. Why? Why is anyone required to be loyal to a political candidate? Not even necessarily a political candidate, simply a person who's considering running who's not necessarily been chosen. He is not the nominee. Very interesting. Also, once again, took credit for DeSantis' narrow 2018 victory, which later led to a landslide re-election in 2022. Ron would not have been governor if it wasn't for me. I do not understand these two lines of attack. First of all, Ron's only governor because of me. Second of all, Ron DeSantis is a globalist. Which is it? I need clarity on this because the attack needs to go one way or the other. Seriously, pick a lane. The other thing that Trump has staunchly defended is his vaccine rollout. And I know that you guys are all huge fans of the vaccine. Trump is still, to this day, taking credit for Operation Warp Speed. So I just want to throw that out there as well. I don't think that Trump is making the right moves here. And I don't understand why he's attempting to kneecap potentially good possible nominees who could run alongside him. They don't necessarily have to run against him. I think Trump views the world a little bit too black and white. He views everyone as either a friend or an enemy. Let's hop to this next one that Google was trying to prevent me from seeing. I just want you guys to be aware of this. We're probably not going to get in super deep on this one because it is from the UK. Army spied on lockdown critics, skeptics with a C, that's how you know it's British, including our own Peter Hitchens, long suspected they were under surveillance. Now we've obtained official records that prove they were right all along. Military operatives were part of an operation that targeted politicians and high-profile journalists who raised doubts about the official pandemic response. A shadowy army unit secretly spied on British citizens who criticized the government's COVID lockdown policies, the Mail on Sunday can reveal. So that sounds like this is an exclusive as well. Military operatives in the UK's Information Warfare Brigade were part of a sinister operation that targeted politicians and high-profile journalists who raised doubts about the official pandemic response. They compiled dossiers on public figures such as ex-minister David Davis, who questioned the modeling behind alarming death toll predictions, as well as journalists such as Peter Hitchens and Toby Young. Their dissenting views were reported back to Number 10. So Number 10 is Number 10, I think, Downing Street there in London, which is where the Prime Minister resides. Very limited grasp on British politics, but this is incredibly really, really bad stuff. And it really makes me wonder if something similar happened in the US. Documents obtained by the civil liberties group Big Brother Watch, that's a great name, and shared exclusively with this newspaper expose the work of government cells such as the Counter-Disinformation Unit based in the Department for Digital Culture, Media and Sport and the Rapid Response Unit in the Cabinet Office. This is something that Konstantin Kisin was talking about. He mentioned that he was from Russia, and over the course of the last year, something like 4 people were arrested, either 4 or 400, I'm sorry, I can't remember which. A smallish number of people were arrested for saying the wrong things in Russia, whereas in the UK, it was in the thousands of people who were arrested for saying the wrong thing, including, and he mentioned the case of the lady who was arrested over sharing rap lyrics that included some kind of disparaging term for people of different races to commemorate the death of her friend who had it as his favorite song. Incredibly crazy case. She was, I believe, literally jailed for posting this information on social media sites. Absolutely shady, absolutely crazy. The UK doesn't feel like the first world anymore. And if you follow the Lotus Eaters, if you follow Callan and Carl and everybody over there, they're constantly talking about all of the problems that the UK is facing. And I feel like we are all pretty much on the same page when it comes to this stuff. We're all kind of fighting the globalists. We're all kind of pushing back against people like the World Economic Forum, which is who we're going to talk about next before we close. So we all have just different shades of all of the same kinds of problems with immigration and with big government and with censorship and stuff like that. So let's read this last little article about Jordan Peterson. He's announcing a World Economic Forum alternatives. Let's hear what he has to say.
An announcement on your show today, and so I set up an international consortium based in London. I can't tell you all the details yet, but we're trying to put together something like an alternative vision of the future, say an alternative to that kind of apocalyptic narrative that's being put forward, at least implicitly, by organizations like the WEF, and that's the virginal planet, rapacious tyrant, all devouring consumer religion. And it's more like something like, well, we want to ask people 6 key questions. Okay, so how do we get energy and resources at the lowest possible cost, as rapidly as possible, to the largest number of people around the world? That's one question. And so there's a presumption in the question, and here's one of the presumptions. you don't get to save the planet by making energy prices so expensive that no one poor can afford them. That's off the table. So if you want to develop alternative energy sources, no problem. Because, hey man, the more energy sources we have, the better. But you don't get to impose your utopian vision in the service of your narcissism on the poor. We're going to try to make the poor rich. Going to try to alleviate absolute poverty. Pro-human view on environmental stewardship front. That's the next question. What are the major problems that are confronting us? How do we take a sophisticated multidimensional view of that? How do we prioritize our attempts to establish our states and our international relationships properly so that we prioritize human well-being, in harmony with nature to the degree that's possible, but human-focused and not predicated on the idea that there are too many goddamn mouths on the planet to feed and that you're evil if you just think about having children. So then on the governance front, this is where it gets kind of more left-wing, I would say, is none of the people involved in this consortium so far are very thrilled with global corporate fascist government media and corporation collusion. And we're seeing this at the high end. It's like a Tower of Babel, is that the powerful players in the world are increasingly collaborating to impose a top-down vision of the future on everyone. And that's a future that's predicated on a zero-growth model. And the idea that, well, we need 5 planets really to support everyone at the current standard of living that obtains in the West. So the best pathway forward is to deny loans by the World Bank to developing countries so they can't develop, energy sources, which all that'll mean is they're going to burn wood and coal, obviously. So that's the third question is, how do we arrange systems of governance to stop the march of something like pathological gigantism? This is why I like people like Russell Brand and also you to some degree politically, because you guys are very, what would you say, sensitive to the danger of that kind of corrupt collusion, that regulatory capture that occurs when corporate entities and media entities and governmental entities are all in bed together.
I have to pause it there because Jordan Peterson to me is so incredibly interesting. I could just listen to this 18-minute video all together in one sitting, and I probably will after we're done here. If you guys want to go and listen to this clip, it is in the links in the description of this video there at the bottom under if we have time. And this is really an interesting idea, and I always appreciate what Jordan Peterson has to say because he seems to nail it every time. And I know that some people didn't like his blue and red suit, and I really don't care because somebody was like, I think it was Sagar and Jetty who showed pictures of him wearing his flashy clothes, and he's like, sorry, not beautiful. And I was just like, hey, you know what? You just discovered something incredibly important about beauty. That is that it's almost entirely subjective. And what I think Sagar seemed to be missing was that when Jordan Peterson said that, his whole point was that he wasn't going to be told that something was beautiful that he didn't find beautiful just because it was acceptable to, for example, the globalists or to the diversity hires who are set on telling us what we are supposed to find attractive, which honestly, good for him. He uses that conciseness of words that I think requires a great deal of introspection that I think that most people don't put into reading tweets. I really had to think about that one myself because I appreciate what Jordan Peterson does and what he has to say. So I really was like, okay, what is he really saying here? It's fine that he doesn't find this lady attractive. I don't really care about that. But I was like, he's correct that he is not going to be told what he himself thinks is beautiful based on some kind of ever-shifting, culturally conscious, politically correct mindset. And I forget how he worded it about no kind of authoritarianism is going to tell him that it is beautiful. And I was like, yes, correct. That's exactly correct. You should not allow yourself to be told by any group what you find attractive because that's crazy. Once they tell you what you find attractive, they'll tell you what you believe next. And that's not a road we want to go down. I completely agree with him. Let's read a little bit of this article and then we'll wrap up. We will wrap up I almost said wrap up, and that's not what we're trying to do. Dr. Jordan Peterson announced he has set up an international consortium with the goal of creating an alternative to the apocalyptic narrative espoused at the World Economic Forum in Davos, Switzerland. Good for him. We always need an alternative. About 2,000 people will be invited to the consortium meeting in London in late October through early November, Peterson told podcaster Joe Rogan in an interview aired Saturday. He said the meeting will present an alternative to that kind of apocalyptic narrative that's being put forward, at least implicitly, by organizations like the World Economic Forum. Consortium will focus on how to get energy and resources at the lowest possible cost as rapidly as possible to the largest number of people around the world, and how to encourage long-term monogamous couples who are child-centered and to make increasing the birth rate part of that policy, among other things. Honestly, good for him, because he does seem to actually be focused on all of the priorities that I think humanity needs most right now, and these are the things that the World Economic Forum absolutely refuses to speak to on any level. It's really quite disgusting the way they refuse to counter any of these ideas, and they refuse to even possibly entertain them. Let's see what you guys are thinking before we wrap and leave here. Andy's been talking quite a little bit. I'm sure we got some interesting feedback about my Trump commentary. So I'm guessing, okay. Because of Confucius Institute. Yeah. All right. What's funny is that people shouting. Andy says, time to feed the tribe. Okay, yeah, we mentioned this. For Dip and Dot treats. Bye. Thank you, St. Miles. We appreciate that a lot. And Dip and Dot will love you forever. Andy says that's why the pray for the billionaire approach isn't going to work. Yes, you can't just have one single point of failure. And this is what I was telling people right from the beginning with Elon Musk, because as enjoyable as that whole saga was, and I really appreciated everything he did, you can't have just one person. One person is not a sufficient dam against the coming flood of all this crazy stuff. All right. I don't know why Trump is attacking DeSantis like he's not even running yet. Yeah, that's correct. He is not. Like, if anything, this is going to make him run. Yeah, for sure. So tired of TDS articles. I don't have TDS, and honestly, the Daily Mail does not either. They were one of his biggest supporters during the 2016 election and through the entirety of his tenure. But the fact of the matter is, when one of your leaders makes what you think is a misstep, you have a moral obligation to call it out, because if you don't, you are just another NPC. This is exactly what Obama had. This is what Hillary Clinton had. Biden has it to a much lesser degree because he's so clearly terrible, but a lot of these Democratic leaders have nothing but NPCs who will do nothing but tell them yes. And I will tell you right now, from my very personal experience, there is nowhere more dangerous than a room where no one will tell you no. I think it's the most important thing in the world to have that kind of pushback, because if you don't, you will never recognize when you're making a misstep. And if no one ever holds your feet to the fire, you're going to fail left, right, and center, and you're never going to know why, and you're never going to learn and change. That's exactly what I see happening with Trump. He is literally involving himself with Lindsey Graham. He was on the side of Rhonda Romney McDaniel, and he keeps making these mistakes. These people are the swamp, and he's on their side, and I see no explanation for this other than the fact that no one is there who will tell him that this is a bad idea. That's really what you need. I'm not TDS. The Daily Mail isn't TDS. And I think that dismissing things like this as just TDS really doesn't fully understand like the nuance surrounding Trump, because you can have a nuanced conversation about Trump, and you should. You should hold him to account just like you hold any other leader, 100%. Loyalty goes both ways. Trump attacking DeSantis for no reason isn't really very loyal behavior either. Yeah, but again, I don't really think there's a whole lot of room for loyalty in politics. Casey says, we are a mob country. If the mobsters are mad about how this country is ran, it's bad. There's no way we can ever reunite this country under Trump, says Andy. I'm kind of inclined to agree. I don't know what I think at this point. I guess we'll have to see. Especially since most of Gen Z has already made up their minds about him. Yeah, for sure. I don't know if we could ever reunite again under any condition. I think reuniting the country needs to be a top priority. I'm fully inclined to agree. We need someone who's capable of being the bigger man. Yeah, for sure. All right, we fixed the volume. Should be good. Andy, how about you become the tech billionaire to save us, says Greg. Andy says, Greg, every super chat helps. And then Greg super chats $5 and says, Andy needs to become the tech billionaire to save us all. That's right. Andy would be a great tech billionaire, if only because he doesn't want the job at all. Wake Up Waverly says the Heaven and Hell suit in concept is cool, but as a suit is wild like Two-Face or some stuff. Yeah, for sure. It's not for everyone. I really like the concept. I think it's really neat. He could have probably put flames on the one side and clouds on the other to make it clear what he was referring to. John says, be right back, must make my bed. Yes, good idea, 100%. Every time I see Jordan Peterson, I'm like, oh my gosh, is my room clean enough to talk about Jordan Peterson? Here's Dot. Hello. She's gazing up at me lovingly. She looks like she has hiccups. I should probably have Andy come get here. Thanks for Fauci and the Vax Trump, says Andy. Yeah, 100%. Very useful. All right, you guys, I'm going to sign off here in just a second. I'm going to go hug this puppy. I don't know if you guys can see her at all. Oh, she's got little hiccups. Oh, poor thing. Oh, I tuned in late. I just spotted puppy. Dot. Yes, this is Dot. Oh, Andy, she's got hiccups. Come get her. All right, guys, I will see you all tomorrow. Same bat time, same bat place. Until next time, bye, guys. How's it going?